Red Glass by Laura Resau, Chapter 8, Picnic with a Cop. The next afternoon, on the fourth day, a huge storm left the sky streaked with orange and yellow, the clouds glowing like gates to heaven. Angel was driving, speeding along, winding around hills, past a huge lake and cornfields. It was probably hard to resist speeding, since there were no cars or houses or people on this stretch, and we had only one day of driving left. Suddenly, red and blue flashing lights appeared behind us. Cops. My stomach jumped. Juan had said cops here were corrupt. They would threaten to arrest you, take your license, demand hundreds of dollars to get it back. Never get into a car with a cop, he'd said. You don't know where they might take you, what they might do. Mom had told us a dozen times, don't speed. Promise me you won't speed. I remembered Angel's box. Chances were whatever he had inside was either valuable or illegal. Either way, we'd be in trouble if the cop found it. I leaned over between the front seats to check if it was hidden, but Angel was already moving his feet against the bottom edge of his seat, making sure the box was safely stashed. He looked terrified. I imagined us rotting in a dungeon cell with only amoeba-infested water to drink and no limes to squeeze over unsanitarily prepared morsels of food. My head felt hot and prickly. This is it. I'm going to die. This time, I'm really going to die. Either I'll die in prison or I'll just pass out right now and never regain consciousness. And we're probably hours from a hospital. And even if we make it to a hospital, it would probably be unhygienic. Oh God, this is it. Dika patted Angel's knee. Don't worry, Angel. It is okay. In the side mirrors, we watched the cop swagger toward us, one slow step at a time. He looked around over the fields as he walked and saw what we saw, that this place was deserted, except for a few falling down shacks in the distance. Finally, his head appeared at the driver's side window. He was a young cop with baby-smooth skin, not much older than me and Angel. Before he could say anything, Dika leaned across Angel, smushing her giant bosom in his lap, and began talking loudly in Spanish. Oh, mijo, you're just in time for our picnic. We're having roasted chicken and tortillas and fruitcake. Come join us. Watch the beautiful sky with us and share our food. Before he could answer, she flung open the side door, climbed down, clutching a bag of food, and spread a blanket in a dusty clearing next to the road. Son, go turn off those lights and come have a picnic. You must be hungry. He obeyed. Maybe he had a bossy mother who'd trained him well, or maybe he was bored. You are too kind, Senora, he said when he returned. He stood by the blanket, grinning. Meanwhile, the rest of us climbed out of the van, keeping our mouths shut. Mr. Lorenzo was dripping with sweat. Angel left the box under the seat. Outside, he positioned himself so that he could keep a close eye on the van. I clutched Pablo's hand and whispered, It'll be okay, Principito. More to calm myself than Pablo, who was just watching everything curiously. Sit down, Dika commanded. Sophie, Angel, sit down and eat. Pablito, you look like the drumsticks best, don't you? Now, what about you, son? What's your name? Jorge. Jorge, what would you like? A thigh? She slapped her thigh. A breast? She gave a bawdy laugh. I flushed. Embarrassed, he said, Anything is fine, Senora. Dika dug her fingers into the chicken and tore out a chunk of breast meat. She arranged it in a tortilla, sliced open an avocado, scooped out green flesh with her slimy chicken hands. Then she cut up a tomato, threw in a few slices, and handed the taco to the cop. And here's salsa, mi amor. Use as much as you like. She made tacos for the rest of us and handed them out. My panic subsided and my hands stopped shaking enough to drench my chicken with lime. Would you squeeze some of that on mine, please, señorita? The cop asked me. I leaned over and squeezed some on his chicken. You like lime, eh? I nodded and smiled, embarrassed. I waited for Angel to make a lime girl comment, but he kept his eyes cast down on his food. Once in a while, he glanced at the van where his box sat hidden in the shadows under the seat. Look at that sky, Jorge, Dika said. What a good job you have, driving around all the time. What a beautiful land you live in. Jorge relaxed after a warm Corona. He grew talkative and told us about his childhood. He'd grown up in the town where we'd bought the chicken. He felt it was a good omen that we'd stopped at Pollo Crispy because his parents owned the place. Plus, he was hungry since he'd skipped lunch. He was covering the shift of a sick cop. Our picnic invitation was a miracle, he said. He reclined on his elbows, working on his second beer. He stared at me. I felt conscious of the way I was chewing the chicken. What's your name? He asked. Sophie, I said. He didn't ask anyone else's name. Look, Sophie, do you see the form of La Virgen in the sky? Do you see it? Sort of, I said. I had no idea what he was talking about. Oh, there it is, I lied. I didn't want to disappoint him. When you're used to guys ignoring you, and suddenly someone, an older guy in a uniform at that, is flirting with you, it's hard not to go along. I see it, Dika shouted. There she is, in that cloud. I should thank her for giving me the opportunity to meet you. He used the singular, informal form of you to meet me, just me. What color are your eyes, Sophie? I shrugged. Gray? They're blue, Dika said. Blue! She wanted to get in the conversation. Here, have some fruitcake. I can see the light coming through the sides, he whispered, like glass marbles. I blushed. Jasmine might have called him a slime ball, but she was used to guys hitting on her. She had that luxury. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Dika smile mischievously. Her plan was working out even better than expected. I snuck a look at Angel. His sunglasses hid his eyes, so it was hard to read his face. His fingers, though, were nervous, rubbing the pendants around his neck, bringing them up to his lips. Mr. Lorenzo was sweating like crazy, mopping his forehead with a faded red handkerchief. The thick flannel shirt wasn't helping. Let me see, Pablo said, coming closer to me, examining my eyes from all angles. The cop ruffled Pablo's hair and drained the last few drops of his second beer. I have to go now, but on your way back, you are welcome to stay at my house. Do you have a pen, Sophie? I went to the van and pulled out a pen and paper from the glove compartment, conscious of his eyes on my back as I walked, as I bent over to reach inside the window. He came over to the van and stood next to me, so close his flowery cologne made my nose itch. Here, I handed him the pen and paper. He wrote his name and number in curly script, then folded the paper carefully and handed it to me. He stepped even closer and looked pointedly into my eyes. Call me. I gave a smile as if we shared a secret. the kind of smile I'd seen girls give to guys in the hallways, saying goodbye before the bell rang and the next class started, kind of tilting my head down but my eyes up. The soppy way he looked back at me made it clear that the last thing on his mind was throwing us in jail. He shook hands with everyone. Angel and Mr. Lorenzo kept their eyes down and forced polite smiles. And then the cop drove off in a cloud of dust. "Well," Dika said, stuffing a piece of fruitcake into her mouth, "no ticket?" "Impresionante," Mr. Lorenzo said. He smiled and wiped off the last remnants of sweat with his handkerchief. "Muy impresionante, señoritas." I laughed. It was impressive and kind of fun. There was something I could learn from Dika. Just when you're sure you'll end up in an unhygienic dungeon, you figure out how to turn the situation on its head. For a moment, I caught a glimpse of how life could be if the sharks turned out to be dolphins, if fear went out like the tide and confidence rushed in to fill its place. If I believed that my bony elbows actually were nice, and maybe there was a shiny stone of greatness buried somewhere inside me. Back in the van, Angel picked up his box and ran his hands over it as if relieved it hadn't grown legs and run away. He let out a long breath and slouched down in the front seat. Saved again by a woman. 2 women.